Okay, welcome everybody to my session on site designs for SharePoint Online. So it's 10 p.m. here in New Zealand, which is where I'm currently sat. And good morning or good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Okay, just a slide to remind you about the SharePoint conference, aka collaboration conference. I'd love to be able to go to Vegas next year. Shout out to all our sponsors who helped make the event possible. And just a reminder about the raffle too, just to get online there and fill out the form and get a chance to win some prizes. So just a little bit about myself. I'm originally from near London in England and now live in New Zealand. Moved out here a couple of years ago with my family to kind of experience living this side of the world. I'm a practice lead for a Dynamics 365 and Power Apps practice for Intergen Limited, but I also have sort of a background in SharePoint, going back to SharePoint 2003, Power BI, sort of over 20 years experience in Microsoft tech really. Outside of work, I'm interested in mountain biking, which is kind of a bit of a prereq here in New Zealand, and also well into my football. So the best team in the world is West Ham, of course. So that's soccer for you guys over in the States, and also into retro computers as well. So if you do know what that arcade game is, put it in the chat and see how many people got it right. Okay, so just take a moment to really give you an overview of what a site design is and what I'm going to be talking about for the next 50 minutes. So there is kind of that statement from Microsoft. It basically describes, a site design, a collection of actions basically that you're going to automatically provision on a site that exists already. Either a new site that you've just created or an existing site that you've created a while back. But basically, there will be, a series of actions. So it might be creating a list, it might be adding a column, and effectively you're going to describe those actions in a JSON script and apply it either via the UI if it's already been provisioned or programmatically. So hopefully your takeaways from this presentation today are going to be basically so you understand what site designs are and also the associated site scripts that kind of go hand in hand with them. Why you should consider site designs if you haven't already before, how to apply a site design either manually or programmatically, how you would kind of approach building and deploying it. I mean, I'm not, I used to do development back in the day, but I wouldn't class myself as a developer, but I can handle, I'm technical enough to handle scripts and kind of know how to kind of, look out for accuracies in syntax in something like JSON, how to kind of write a JSON file, validate it, and then go through some steps to provision it. So that's kind of really all you need to understand and know. You don't necessarily need to be a full-blown developer to be able to handle this stuff. You should be able to understand what's possible to do with site designs and what's not, and also how to extend them. So the things that you can't do, how would you go about extending those with something like calling a flow or applying some PMP, for example? Okay, so let's give you a bit of an overview to start with, and what I'll do is straight go into like a demo, and I'll bring up my tenant. Here's my SharePoint site, my sort of SharePoint environment. If I go to create a new site and I pick one of these two templates, if I pick a team site, normally that would just be kind of blank because there's only one site design provisioned out of the box. And if I pick a communications site, then I get a choice of these. And these are effectively kind of base site designs provided by Microsoft for you to use. What you would do is apply and you'd build and deploy a custom site design, and then you would get those available in your list. So when you deploy, you basically target either a team site or a communication site, or it could be a site that's been created by a Microsoft team, for example. And then you would apply this. So I'm going to pick, for example, my my custom one. I'll give it a name, demo conf, and then I will create my site. I'm not going to add any extra owners. Basically now you get this little note at the top here. It says we're updating your site design, so I can view the progress of that. And it's basically going to go through and provision all my different steps and give me a log back of which ones worked and which ones didn't. And then I can update my site. It gives it a bit of a refresh, and then certain things would have happened to that site. So if I want to double check what happened, I can go back to site designs, see when that site design was applied, and I've updated my regional settings to New Zealand. I've added some site columns there and another list as well. So let's just flick back to the slides. So what did I just kind of go through there? Well, effectively what's happening in the background is you create your site through your base kind of style. Then you pick a template that you want to apply to it. And then once you've filled out your details for the site, SharePoint will go away and provision that for you. Now, initially it will provision the kind of the out of the box team site, like the underlying base site design, if you like. And then what it will do finally is apply your customizations on top of that. And that's effectively what it's doing in the background. It's important to understand what the kind of how site designs are and the terminology between a site script and a design. What's kind of, you know, the difference there? Well, basically, think of the site design as like the container, if you like. So if we just get my laser pointer there, you should be able to see that. So here, this kind of dotted line, it's like your container, that's your design. That's the thing that you're actually going to, or the user is going to apply, like I just did there in my site, the thing that I'm going to pick. And then behind the scenes, there will be one or more scripts associated with that design that will contain the actions that are going to, you know, build out what you want to do, basically. So the scripts will contain the actions like create list, create form, etc. And you can have multiples of those. It's not one for one. So you can kind of componentize your scripts, if you like, if you've got snippets that you want to use, you know, throughout your kind of tenant, then you can carve those up and kind of apply those and bundle them up into site designs. So maybe you might have one site design that doesn't want to do a certain piece. That's the best way to approach that. There are some limits to be aware of. So 100 site designs per tenant and 100 scripts per tenant so far. Microsoft have been increasing those up, but that's kind of where it is at the moment. Okay, so what does a site script look like? Well, it's a JSON file. If you're not familiar with JSON file, you know, essentially it's like a markup in a text file, if you like. It's the simplest way of describing it, based on some kind of schema. So Microsoft provide the schema that you've got to follow. There's the link to it there. And you know, again, this site will also provide you with some snippets to be able to build this up. And you know, like I've got here in my example, I've got the kind of the header and footer of the file, if you like, and then all my actions go in the middle. So for example, if I want to join my site to a hub site once it's been created, then it's quite a simple action. And actions always have a verb, which is the doing thing. So I want to join the hub site, and then it's usually got some other parameters, like in this case, a hub site ID, and I provide the GUID of the hub site there. So that's quite a simple script that I would apply to do that. The scripts are, it's important to know that kind of actions are run in the order listed. So if you think about if you were manually building out a site, you wouldn't go and create a list necessarily well, I wouldn't anyway. I'd kind of approach it that I would build my site columns first, then I'd build my content types on top of that, then I'd build out my lists on top of that, and I kind of go through that approach. And that's really the approach you need to follow when you're building these designs out, because if you put an action in to say basically provision a list and use this content type, and you haven't actually deployed the content type yet, then it's going to complain. So you've got to make sure you do things in the right order. And also, there's no problem running these scripts multiple times, so I can apply that script I just run. I could do that again. It wouldn't destruct anything or double anything up. Okay, another example of a script there, so a bit more complicated one. This one's creating a list. It's going to be a custom list called inventory, and then you'll notice there's some sub actions. So it's not, that's kind of really just going to provision an empty list. I need to give it some columns and things. So inside here I've got some other actions. So I'm going to set the description of the list, and I'm also going to add a field to that as well. And there's the Microsoft reference is excellent really in terms of giving you snippets of code to use. So what's possible with site designs? I see it as effectively like a kind of provisioning, like a replacement almost of templating, like the old kind of STP files used to do, and really kind of primarily used to kind of provision your information architecture, if you like. It does do other things, but I see it as you can also do a lot of this stuff or all of this stuff with PnP as well, and your developers would kind of probably prefer to go down that road, whereas I quite like the site design approach to do certain things and then maybe top it up with PnP and take that approach. So provision all those things, so site columns and content types and so forth. Then you can do some other configuration, like set the logo, apply themes. Regional settings is a popular one because most of the sites kind of come with like US settings. You can control security, so you can add users to groups and things like that and manage guest access. And there is some content you can add folders and files. I particularly probably wouldn't go down that route. I would probably, if I wanted to add folders and files and content structure, I'd probably do that through PnP, to be honest. Mainly because site designs are primarily designed to be run in a synchronous manner. So you don't want these to be too complicated. And I'll talk a little bit about long site designs a little bit later on. And then if you do kind of reach a limitation or you want to trigger something else, even if it was an email to someone to say, hey, your site's been provisioned and it's been updated with this new design, you can call a flow, and there your kind of extensions are kind of endless really. Cool. So how do we go about building a site script? Well, first of all, all you really need in basics is like a Notepad++ or like some kind of editor. Visual Studio Code's another popular one. You can go and get the JSON schema, and there's everything you need to know there to build up a file pretty quickly. Remember, it's case sensitive. There's other libraries on the net that give you really good snippets and things. And this link here, this Site Designer IO, I mean, this kind of came out probably when site designs first came out, like 18 months, maybe even a couple of years ago, when there wasn't much information. And this really was gold dust in terms of like being able to build up your site script here and then have the script map out for you ready to import in. So it's still available, and it's a great tool. Cool. And once we've got our file, then we need to go about deploying it. And basically, you can do it through REST. I prefer to use PowerShell. So your key commandlets really are add the script. So you create the script file, you then deploy it almost to like the library of script files in your kind of admin tenant, if you like. So you do that through the adds SPO site script commandlet. So these are all based around the SPO service PowerShell module as opposed to the PnP one. And really you're kind of provisioning this stuff to your your tenant, if you like, as opposed to a particular site. So add the script to the library, give it a name and a decent kind of description, because if you're using quite a few of these, you're going to want to make sure you keep a handle on that and have some kind of naming convention there. Then you're going to add your design, and when you add your design, you're basically telling it, here's my design, this is, and again, this is important, this is what's going to appear to users when they pick it. The web template is pretty important, so it's basically, in its simplest form, is telling the site design where to bind it to, whether to the team site or the communication site. So team site is 64, communication site is I've used team sites so often, I think it's 61 or something like that, or something else anyway. There's all the references on there and at the back of the slide deck as well. Give it a description, and then here bundle your IDs of your scripts that you're going to link to this design. Okay, and then another useful thing to know is that you might not want everyone in your organization to have access to all the site designs that you're provisioning. Now, out of the box and by default, the site designs are available to everybody. As soon as you deploy it, it's automatically available to any SharePoint user. What you then might want to do is kind of grant design rights to a specific group or user. And once you do that, then the rest of people's rights disappear. So for example, I deploy my site design, it's available to everybody in the business. I then apply this grant SPO design rights PowerShell command, say to this group. Then what happens is basically only people in that group will have access to that design, and everyone else won't be able to see it at all. And that's kind of a good approach, if you have got departmental kind of site designs, or you might have a site design that's just applicable to Teams, the SharePoint sites that are linked to Teams, for example, and you don't want people to kind of just go and update their other regular SharePoint sites with that design. So again, you can kind of apply this, and then if you want to kind of blank it out, take it back to everybody again, you can use the revoke PowerShell command like there. Cool. So I'm going to now sort of branch out again and go into another demo. And I'm going to show you how to build one of these and deploy it. So go back to my tenant here. Actually, I'm going to start with Visual Studio Code. So I've got basically a blank site design file here, which I'm sort of building up in Visual Studio Code. And if you go to the JSON schema library here that Microsoft provide, and go to the schema reference. First thing it gives you is like this kind of shell, and basically you can copy that, which is effectively what I've done here, put into my file, and all my kind of actions go in the middle here. And what you can do is, this is pretty good the way it's laid out. If you say, for example, I want to apply a theme, I can take the snippet there, put it into my code, and update it to match the kind of naming convention of my theme or whatever. So what I'm going to do here is I am going to I'm just going to bring up another file that I prepared earlier and nick some stuff out of here. So I'm going to basically update the regional settings. There's my snippet there. I'm going to put that into my middle here. I've got a comma there because I've got another command I'm going to use. I'm going to scroll right down and I'm going to apply a theme. There we go. So I'm going to do two actions there. Basically, I'm going to set my regional settings to New Zealand, and I'm going to apply this custom finance theme to my site. Now, with themes, you can actually only apply custom themes. You can't apply the out-of-the-box ones. So you've got to at least create one of those. And again, they're fairly straightforward to do. So I'm going to save that. Then I've got some script here, which is going to deploy this site design or this script and create a site design. So I've just put some parameters in here. So I'm pointing to my tenant URL, the file that I've just created, the template. There we go. So it's 68 for communication site, not 61, as I said earlier. I'm going to give my script a name, and I'm going to give my site designer name. So this one is what users are going to see, and a description. I could put an image up for the, to show preview for the site, but I'm not going to bother for this demo. And then I'm going to connect to the SharePoint service, and I'm going to run this command basically, which is going to get the content from my script file. Then it's going to push that into an add SPO script commandlet, and then get the ID from that, and then apply that to add a site design all in one go. So let's see if this actually runs. There we go. So what that does, basically, it gives me an ID back for my site design, and also in brackets what script is used for that design and template, etc. Exactly what I told it to do. So now that's deployed. If I go to my tenant and I try and create a new site, I pick my team site, and there's my marathon team site that I just deployed. Finish up there. It tells me it's applying my design, and there's just a couple of things that I told it to do. Should hopefully rattle through those pretty quickly, and then oh, you can see I've got like my nice red finance theme, Red Devils Finance. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to show you is basically if I go to another user here, Clint Eastwood. So Clint's got a bin provisioned a SharePoint site through his team. Here we go. Let's open that in SharePoint. And he would be able to kind of apply that design basically. If I go to site designs, he can apply that marathon team site design to his site if he wants. Now, if I don't want him to do that as an administrator, then what I can do is I basically need to get the oops, I don't want to do that. You can tell I'm not that great with Visual Studio Code. I'm not a dev by nature. And no, I can't find my file. Never mind. What I'll do is see if I've got my snippet back here that I can use. So if we go to grant design rights, and I basically push this in here. So the identity I'm going to use is the one that I just got from I just got back. I'm going to put that here. And then I'm going to sort out my quotes. Basically what I'm going to do is apply rights so that only the people in the Office 365 group creators group can view or apply that site design. And yeah, so there's probably a bit of an issue with some characters in there. Let's try that again. No worries. What I'll do is I'll come back to that a bit later and see if I can sort that out. But effectively, I'd run that, and then our good guy Clint Eastwood would not be able to see that file. And if I wanted to open it back up to him again, I'd use the revoke. Cool. Let's go back to our slide deck. Okay, we're just going to look at sort of a bit of advanced configuration here. So a few things now. The kind of native commands or native actions for these columns up here. So your text and your multi-line text field, your number, and so forth. If you want to do any other fields, such as a choice field or a managed metadata field, you basically what you're going to do is you'll need to get the kind of the camel markup or the XML for that kind of field construct, and then you can use the add sp field XML control and pass that schema in. So this kind of syntax here. Okay, so in this example, I basically got a choice field called product category. It's got some choices in here, and I've got the default, etc. I can provision that using the add field XML, and that will deploy that field for me. There are ways that you can actually grab the XML by using these commandlets. So get the SPO site script from list and from web. Those commands are pretty handy because what they will do is if you pass your list or your site in, it will effectively spit out the JSON construct for those items, and you can then kind of pick out what you need from that and build up your site design. So they're pretty handy commandlets to know. Okay, the next problem is like adding managed metadata columns, and this is not really called out at all on the Microsoft JSON schema, although you know, in reality it is effectively XML markup. So you're using, again, your kind of create field XML or create site column XML, depending on what level you want the field to be, and you're passing in the schema. But what the site doesn't tell you, and actually there was a really handy blog post, which I'll put a link in my references slide, was how to kind of construct this. And effectively what you need for a managed metadata field is two of these. So you need a note field, which is basically you're going to need to create a new note field. So you're going to create a new GUID for that, generate a new GUID, create this construct with the you know, the name of your note field, and it's going to be hidden. So you'll copy this, and basically, you know, if you wanted a field called business function, then your names for this are going to have tax HT field appended to it. And then what you're going to need to do on top of that is create this blob of XML here. So this is basically your second site column XML, and this is going to reference the managed metadata structure, the taxonomy structure in your term store. So you're going to reference you're going to need to go to your term store and get these GUIDs. So you're going to need the SSP ID, that's the kind of the term store ID if you like, the group ID and the term set, and then or where your term actually lives, and then the text field is going to reference that note, that GUID that I created earlier, and that all kind of links together, and that will generate your manage metadata field for you. Now, I showed you right at the beginning about basically how to apply a site design manually. It might not be sufficient for you to do that. You might not want your users to do that every time. You know, it's fine if they're self-serving sites, but if you're provisioning sites for them, or there are, you know, sites being provisioned, for example, like in the case of provisioning a team, you'll get a SharePoint site. You don't want people to have to go in and manually kind of apply that site design to that site. So there are ways to apply these programmatically. The most common approach is the Invoke PnP site design. So there is a SPO service command, PowerShell command equivalent of this, Invoke site design. When I'm doing this, I kind of my personal approach is to use the PnP site design, because that you're kind of, to connect to PnP, you're connecting to a specific site URL, and then you know you're applying the site design to the correct site, where as opposed to passing a parameter in. And usually you're wanting to do other stuff on top of that, so you're kind of already connected to the PnP module and or service, and therefore you can kind of, once that's finished, you can do other stuff. Now this command is synchronous, so and because of that, there's this maximum 30 actions or verbs that you can use. Okay, so if you have any more than that, it will just kind of hang basically and won't finish. So if you've got a large site design that's got more than this, then you'll need to go to this approach to deploy it programmatically, which is add the SPO site design task. So that basically is, you can have up to 300 verbs, and that's because it's an asynchronous. It will just basically, it won't sit there. It will basically fire off a job that will fire off in the background when SharePoint's ready. If I get time, I'm going to show you basically like an approach I use to provisioning teams, where I've got an Azure runbook, and that runbook, when it's called from a flow, will invoke a site design on a team site. So I'll show, hopefully I should be able to get time to show you that shortly. Next up is kind of how to extend your site design. So you've applied your site design, promote programmatically or manually or whatever, and there are some things that you can't do with site design. So you can't kind of manipulate web parts or you know, do anything particular with the homepage, for example, of your site. You can create some content with the site design, but you know, if you're wanting to deploy like sets of documents, templates, or kind of a folder structure or whatever it might be, I'd probably prefer to do that in PnP. So, you know, I would, you can basically take one of these two approaches to either call a flow or logic app, or call like the PnP provisioning engine. The latter I'm not too experienced in, but basically my understanding is that, you know, you can, you know, there's a hook into calling that, and you can use a kind of a PnP provisioning template, which can do extra stuff on top of your site design. Or you can just kind of trigger a flow, and that can basically do whatever you want it to do as well. So your approach with the flow would be to create an HTTP request trigger for your flow, and you paste this code in, which basically gives it the kind of hooks for the site design to, you know, trigger and push into. And then you grab that URL there, and what you would then do is add this to your site design. So you'd have a trigger flow, give it the URL, pass in the names and parameters that you want, as specified here, and then your site design would obviously trigger that flow. And usually you'd have this obviously at the end of your site design, to kind of, it's done everything it needs to do. This is the final thing, go off and trigger the flow, and then the site design will finish. Okay, so I think we've got about 10 minutes left. So I'm going to see what I can demonstrate to you in terms of extending and connecting your site design up to other things. Okay, so firstly, if I go to my file, so here was my kind of the site design we built up earlier. I did a prep one earlier tonight, so I included some other things. So as well as set the regional settings here, I'm creating a couple of, I'm creating this manage metadata field. So you can see I've got my note field there. It's called business function. And there's my taxonomy field, and that's the one that links to the actual taxonomy structure. So a pretty meaty old file there, and you've got to be really careful with this, your syntax on that markup. I mean, there's some GUIDs that require the brackets, and some GUIDs that don't require the brackets. And basically, if you take my deck and you follow this as your template, you'll be good to go. But if you put a bracket in the wrong place, your site design will fail intermittently. I've had that problem. There's my alarm telling me I've got 10 minutes to go, so we're all good. Okay, so yeah, I'm doing this other stuff, and at the end, basically, I'm going to trigger this flow here, which is going to call this URL. So if I hook out to my flow, here we go, here's my flow. So here's my trigger, and then basically all I'm going to do is send myself an email to say, yep, we've successfully triggered the flow. So I can test that by, let's apply it to this demo marathon site, which we've already kind of done. So let's apply my another available site design, so which is our prep. You can see all the steps there. I'm going to apply that to the site. So you can see here, like, I've already applied my marathon team site. Now I'm applying my prep site on top of that, basically. So it's going through there. Oops. Create my library, triggered my flow, and you can see the flows kind of run immediately there. And I've got that email pop up to say, yeah, it's all good. And if I go back here, you can see my flows just succeeded there. So, and obviously with flow, you can do anything there. You can kind of hook out to perhaps some PMP that's in a runbook, or call a logic app, or whatever you might need to do. Coming the other way, so, for example, I want to show you like a solution. I go to SharePoint. I'm going to go to my Teams management. Got a Teams request list here. And if I add a new team, so let's call this one Marathon Team. It's going to be a private team. Stuff. I am going to be the owner, and my business function is going to be finance. And if I save that off, then my team request goes onto the stack. So the purpose of this is, basically to kind of get some control and governance around provisioning of teams. And I did a presentation on this, recorded this for the Galactic Summit. Now, if I go to my Outlook, what you'll see is basically in my flows, I've got a approve team. So that's running currently. And I should have got a email to tell me that I need to approve that. Let's see if it's in my approvals list. Here we go, marathon team, let's approve it. I can see the details of the team there, and I just confirm. The email coming a bit too late, really, but the beauty of that is I can approve that sort of directly in. It's just updated it for me and say I've already done it. So it shows the link up there between the email and the approvals in Flow. Then what that will do is basically update the record to approved and trigger another flow. So if I go back to my flows, I've got my create team flow here, and that eventually will kind of should trigger off. There it goes, it's running. What that flow is going to do, if I just edit here, effectively it's going to execute a runbook to create the team. I'll show you the runbook shortly, and then if that runbook is successful, then it will confirm the team's been created, send some emails back to the user, and then I'm going to execute another runbook which will provision the SharePoint stuff. And in that runbook is I'm going to be invoking a SharePoint site design. And if I just flick over to Azure and go into my automation account, look at my runbooks. If I look at my provision SharePoint runbook, there's some very kind of simple code where I'm passing in some parameters here, connecting to my SharePoint site that's associated with the team, connecting to the PMP online module, and there's my command there, invoke the site design, and the ID of the site design that I want to use and apply to my team sites. And then I'm kind of just showing that I'm adding some other stuff as well. So here I'm kind of basically, populating that term, that managed metadata column with some data, and I could do other stuff in there, kind of anything in the PMP library, basically. Cool. So I don't know where that's got up to right now, but if we refresh, we can see that's running, and I might be able to see some output from that. I can see the some of the stuff that's come through. I've generated an alias for my team because I picked finance. This one's Fin31. Again, that's going to hop into my SharePoint URL, and again, some good governance there to control that kind of alias instead of letting Microsoft generate it for me. I just got a ping in my inbox. The team's been created there. And if I go to my Teams suite, it kind of proves that, governance around Teams doesn't have to kind of hold anything up. I provision a team in kind of a matter of seconds, really, or minutes, and also provision like a stock SharePoint site design to my team, and it hasn't had to hold up. But I've also got a nice log of all my SharePoint, all my teams that have been created, and who's created them, etc. So there we can see there's my, I can already see that I've got the red kind of site design that's been added to. If I go to my contents, I've added like a non-Teams documents library. If I go to my site designs, I can see the site design for Teams has been, and I think that's all pretty cool, to be honest. So they're kind of, if I go back to my slides and sort of finish up, really, please and give me some feedback. It'd be really kind of useful to get that. Thank you for listening. I hope that has all been useful and give you a good overview of site designs and how you can use them, how you can extend them. And I'm just going to have a quick check to see if there's any questions or anything. Cool. Okay, so from where do we get the ID while we run the PowerShell script? So I think if you're referring to like the ID of the site design, if I just quickly go into my PowerShell ISE, I'm actually probably not going to have time to do that thinking about it, just looking at the time. But I'll take a note of these, but effectively with that you'll when you apply your site script, you'll get an ID back. You take that ID, you can either pipe it into the next command, or you can take that out and reuse that somewhere else. And you can always do a get SPO site script to get the ID back, or a get SPO site design to get the ID back. Can you design the start page of a site by placing sections and web parts? You can't use that. We do that sort of stuff with site designs, but you can do that sort of stuff with PnP and call that from a flow or the other extension methods that I mentioned towards the end of the deck. Is it possible to apply changes to an existing page via site design? To an existing page, again, I'm assuming you're thinking there around web parts. That's kind of similar to the question above, which is basically, no, you can't target a specific page. You can do, but you can do that with PnP. You know, manipulate web parts and so forth. I can provide some code for that if you want to contact me on LinkedIn, and possibly help you out there. Yeah, cool. Hopefully that's answered everyone's questions, particularly around, you know, I think the questions have a similar theme there, which is what can you can't do with site designs. Site designs really, I would say, focus on structure of your site. So adding libraries, content types, columns, and so forth, and setting settings like regional settings or applying a theme. If you want to manipulate particular pages, web parts, add web parts, move web parts, that's definitely something that you would do with like a PnP script and apply that after. So I would, you know, trigger a flow, call an Azure runbook or something like that, and then push your code in by that approach. And again, contact me on LinkedIn. I'll give you some examples and a bit more detail. Cool. So really appreciate those of you out there listening, whatever time of day or night it is. I'm a bit hot spiked on adrenaline right now, so I'm gonna probably go and have a drink, listen to some music, and then get some sleep. And I'm on leave tomorrow, so I'm really looking forward to a day off and a long weekend. I'll share one ironic thing with you. When I was in England all those years, 30 odd years of my life, never once did we get a holiday for the Queen's birthday. But I come out to New Zealand and that's exactly what we get. So Monday is a bank holiday for the Queen's birthday, and I would say cheers to the Queen, happy birthday, and thank you everyone for listening, and I'll catch you soon. Take care.